video or this live is about Prakruti. Ayurvedic concept of Prakruti, the way it is interpreted, the way I look at it, and the necessities that come out of it to be recognized. Prakriti has been recognized as the mainstay of Ayurvedic treatments, Ayurvedic diagnosis, and that cannot be refuted by anyone who practices Ayurveda. However, the assessment of Prakriti has long been less mathematical, more driven out of inferences. There are paper and pencil tools, there are questionnaires, some people do it by Nadi, and it does not do enough justice to the idea of Prakriti. First, let me pick on why it does not do enough justice. That is because of two reasons, to be short and brief on. One, the reason is that the paper pencil tool or whatever we are accounting for accounts for the moment in which the Prakriti is being measured. It accounts for the time that the Prakriti is being assessed. But there is no standardization available to compare it. Second, the point with Prakriti here is that it misses, or any discussion on it misses, the idea of the gap that if there is a standard, then the Prakriti at birth addresses. This is important to analyze and understand, because even at birth, if there is a standardized Prakriti to be assumed, then more than natural, it is quite a possibility that the birth Prakriti itself will be with a flaw and with a gap. Why I call it a flaw is because that presence of a gap renders the human body or the animal body or any living constituent for which the Prakriti is being measured as their being unnatural and allowing capitalization of it by external forces, leading to derangements in internal mechanisms or anything to say, and cause susceptibility to diseases of a number of kinds. There may be also a possibility that some of this is rendered by derangements in DNA and RNA structures, leading to genetic anomalies. To detail into genetic anomalies will be a different subject, perhaps a different requirement. But starting with this anomaly, with this gap, the idea that the Prakriti progresses from a Kapha dominance to a Vata dominance as you age also means that there is a relative chance of any of the other Prakritic dominant phases becoming dominant much before than the aspirational age. If I were to put 121 years of expected Vedic life on a numerical scale and put it as equivalent, and I consider it into 5 phases, then at every 24.5 years, 24.2 years, you have a possibility of a Prakritic transition happening. So at 24.2 years, something that was supposed to happen, if there is a inherent gap in the Prakriti at birth, it might either be before or it might be delayed. Any of these consequences simply means that the body's internal metabolic environment is going to respond in accordance with the Prakriti, or the homeostasis of the body is not going to be normal as expected. Now, this gap can also be addressed in modern scientific ideas as the range of values for various investigations, various tests that we qualify and see, which addresses a range between two numbers on a numerical scale, and anything lying in between is considered normal. Now, when you have a transition across 24.2 years of age, it is quite a long time, and for all referential purposes, it may be assumed that yes, this is an appropriate timeline, and in this, if there is a gap between two reference values, it stands normal. However, in case of Prakriti, since it is being compared against a point zero, the birth Prakriti at zero, so any gap does not have a reference range. It is an anomaly. Mathematically, it is either a bias up or a bias down the curve. And it is from there that the life is taking an edge upwards towards a lifespan considered to be 121 years. In between the course of 121 years, there is also going to be various events of illness, of life, of emotional turbulence, of geographic changes, and all those factors accounted, the Prakriti is more and more into a shock wherein it keeps balancing and adjusting against those changes all the time. So it is not following a standardized curve, but the entire curve could be upwards or downwards, and it will not follow a typical sigmoid curve kind of a thing, rather a more hazy zigzag curve wherein the gap between 2 points at the base sometimes would be low and sometimes would be high, or less and more. This less and more of gap is inverse to the metabolics. Wherever the gap is less, it is to be inferred, it is to be understood that the metabolic events are at a faster rate, and wherever the gap is bigger or more, the metabolic events are expected to be slower. Now, this difference of metabolics also accounts for the idea that the slow or the fast pace of metabolism is going to affect the further course of Prakriti changing, or the homeostasis, or the chemical homeostatic, or the biochemical homeostatic environment, in whichever terminology one wants to understand. The human body is going to change and respond in accordance with those changes. So, when you have this variation of Prakriti in such forms, you cannot look at it on a referential scale of a range. It is dot by dot. And dot by dot changes to Prakriti always influence the idea that it is mathematical rather than statistical. It does not give you a frequency range, it does not give you a range where the attributes will change or multiply. So, on further consideration of these ideas, the other point that comes to the reference here is that Prakriti is a subject which needs to be understood not so casually. Till now, I am just talking with respect to one factor, that is age, which is a standardized factor across the globe. If I look at it from another perspective, then and add another element to it, say geography. So, for every geography, the temperature in that geography is going to be variable across different periods of the year. And as those temperature variances have to be accounted for as part of geography, let that be a standard, because that again becomes a numerical standard and a linear standard across the scale, of course, moving in both the directions in this case, unlike age moving only in one direction. The influence of this factor along with age on metabolics becomes different. And it is in the most basic way, seeing that the metabolics of a kid, infant, a child, a youth, an adult, and an aged are very, very different. And as those metabolics are different, so the body is also responding to those different age concerns. Now, age and temperature coming together account for a kind of duality, wherein sometimes or in certain situations, and the age may be pushing a factor, say Vat, upwards, and the temperature may be pushing the factor of Vat downwards. Now, between the two, there has to be a point of arrival, which is the balance or the homeostasis as the body perceives it, and it moves on. We know from modern science, for understanding, that people of different geographical origins and in people of different geographical origins living in different geographical regions always provide for different states of the body. So when a person is in his born geographic limit, his behavior is a certain way, and when that changes, his behavior accordingly changes. In addition, there are other factors as seasons or as vegetation or as social circle or as workplace environment. So when you have these multitude of factors playing between each other and influencing Prakriti as a whole, they gaps that you'll arrive at various points when the curve is more sigmoid are definitely not going to be singular or static, but they are going to present a very, very hazy form which cannot be universal to two people. So, any idea that assumes Prakriti without a standardization, without a mathematical model, without trying to account for different variables in an algebraic paradigm, in a statistical paradigm, is a flawed model and is flawed to the extent that it cannot be predictive for a long term or any predictions for the past. Most predictive long term outcomes or most predictive assumptions of the past are based either on experience or on broad assumptions, but they cannot be drawn to be conclusive. They cannot be drawn to be in terms to say that this is the reason or this is how it works. That is where a Prakriti assessment model, which is mathematical or algebraic and looks to imbibe all the possible 7 or 8 variables and process them through a model of permutations and combinations in between of all kinds of possibilities where only 2 or all the 7 of the factors are interacting among each other is a crucial model. It affects the assessment, it affects the quality of diagnosis, and it affects also the quality of treatment. To say that Ayurveda is lame or to say that Ayurveda is a pseudoscience goes against the basic modeling idea of mathematics. And also, when I stress so much on mathematics or on modern science, it is not with the idea that I am looking at modern science as a validation for Ayurveda. Not at all. Ayurveda does not need that. The only purpose of relating or finding comparisons or comparatives between modern science is to be able to communicate the point to a larger section which does not come even close to understanding the complications within the Ayurvedic streams of assessment. It is sad that in Ayurvedic colleges, we are not really taught these statistics. We are not even working on these statistics. And it is also sad that Ayurveda still fails to recognize the importance of mathematics in its entire training. Fact is that Ayurveda is an application of a larger science, and science by itself is a very big domain which covers not just biology but physics, chemistry, and mathematics together. As a whole, Ayurveda stands a complete science where different elements of it can be read, can be interpreted, and seen to come to the point of arrival that Ayurveda is not just a medical science, but medicine is just a small application of a much larger bracket which stands by itself, which has its own language. And mathematics remains a universal language between all forms of sciences. So, it will be important to codify Ayurvedic contexts in terms of mathematics. That is what, as a first attempt, Ayurscan, the software that I keep talking about, something that I have put all my experience into, looks to do. Anybody who wants to experience the effectiveness of it is welcome to do so. We welcome people to see it as phase 1 is already public. Right now, we are working on phase 2. Further, we look to work it across maybe phase 10 or 11 as it goes in its journey of evolution. It is an interesting idea to see the evolution of this software by itself as we move along. In phase 2, now we are looking to concentrate on each individual physiological system and from it draw the ideas of how that particular system works. And this may not seem to corroborate with the whole Prakruti of the individual as is looked upon. It also will definitely stand a strong variable against what is mentioned in the texts. But what is mentioned in the texts is a standard, and that is where we have to learn and understand that those standards will be breached. That is when there will be a Vikriti, which is very well written in the texts, that derangement from the standard is going to cause changes which are either reversible or irreversible, and those changes, reversible or irreversible, manifest in form of different diseases. So, coming back to the point, there's nothing that is too different. There's nothing that is not in the texts. It is just the idea that we understand that what is there in the texts has to be reinterpreted, has to be reproduced, has to be redesigned to make it more contemporary. Unless you make things contemporary, they will never be acceptable, because that is when they fail to evolve over time. Need for Ayurveda is to evolve with the time. Anybody who looks to join me on this journey, anybody who wants to be a part of this journey, anybody who can look forward to integrating himself into this idea is welcome to work along with me. I will be looking forward to people who sincerely look to work on the ideas of Ayurveda in an evolutionary concept. That is what Health Beyond Healing is all about. That is what its joint venture with Ayurvedic Health Iceland with Vedamag Tea is all about. That is what Ayurscan ultimately looks to do, to bring to the awareness of people, of students, of an international community which aspires to use Ayurveda, and also the international community which criticizes Ayurveda, to work together to help realize a contemporary idea which actually is very, very pertinent to times, both in terms of science and humanity. Thank you.